The Secret Doctrine by Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, a facsimile of the original edition of 1888, printed by the Cunningham Press, Alhambra, California. Volume 1, Cosmogenesis. Book 1, Part 3, Science and the Secret Doctrine Contrasted. Addenda to Book 1. Addenda, Chapter 8, Life, Force, or Gravity. The imponderable fluids have had their day. Mechanical forces are less talked about. Science has put on a new face for this last quarter of a century. But gravitation has remained, owing its life to new combinations after the old ones had nearly killed it. It may answer scientific hypotheses very well, but the question is whether it answers as well to truth and represents a fact in nature. Attraction by itself is not sufficient to explain merely planetary motion. How can it presume to explain the rotary motion in the infinitudes of space? Attraction alone will never fill all the gaps unless a special impulse is admitted for every sidereal body, and the rotation of every planet with its satellites is shown to be due to some one cause combined with attraction. And even then, says an astronomer, Philosophie naturelle, article 142, science would have to name that cause. Occultism has named it for ages, and so have all the ancient philosophers, but then all such beliefs are now proclaimed exploded superstitions. The extracosmic God has killed every possibility of belief in intracosmic intelligent forces, yet who or what is the original pusher in that motion? Quote, when we have learned the cause, unique et spécial, that pushes, we will be ready to combine it with the one which attracts, unquote, says Francoeur in Astronomie, page 342. And again, attraction between the celestial bodies is only repulsion. It is the sun that drives them incessantly onward, for otherwise their motion would stop, unquote. If ever this theory of the sun force being the primal cause of all life on earth and motion in heaven is accepted, and if that other far bolder one of Herschel about certain organisms in the sun is accepted even as a provincial hypothesis, then will our teachings be vindicated, and esoteric allegory shown to have anticipated modern science by millions of years, probably, for these are the archaic teachings. Martanda, the sun, watches and threatens, without abandoning the central position to which his mother, Aditi, relegated him, his 7 brothers, the planets. He pursues them, turning slowly around himself, and follows them from afar, moving in the same direction as they do on the path that encircles their houses, or the orbit. See comment to stanza 4, Book 1. It is the sun fluids or emanations that impart all motion and awaken all into life in the solar system. It is attraction and repulsion, but not as understood by modern physics and according to the law of gravity, but in harmony with the laws of manvantaric motion designed from the early Sandhya, the dawn of the rebuilding and higher reformation of the system. These laws are immutable, but the motion of all the bodies, which motion is diverse and alters with every minor kalpa, is regulated by the movers, the intelligences within the cosmic soul. Are we so very wrong in believing all this? Well, here is a modern and great man of science who, speaking of vital electricity, uses language far more akin to occultism than to modern materialistic thought. We refer the skeptical reader to an article on The Source of Heat in the Sun by Robert Hunt, FRS, in Popular Science Review, Volume 4, page 148, who, speaking of the luminous envelope of the Sun and its, quote, peculiar curdy appearance, unquote, says, quote, Arago proposed that this envelope should be called the photosphere, a name now generally adopted. By the elder Herschel, the surface of this photosphere was compared to mother of pearl. It resembles the ocean on tranquil summer day, when its surface is slightly crisped by a gentle breeze. Mr. Nasmyth has discovered a more remarkable condition than any that had previously been suspected. Objects which are peculiarly lens-shaped, like willow leaves, different in size, not arranged in any order, crossing each other in all directions with an irregular motion among themselves. They are seen approaching to and receding from each other, and sometimes assuming new angular positions, so that the appearance has been compared to a dense shoal of fish, which indeed they resemble in shape. The size of these objects gives a grand idea of the gigantic scale upon which the physical operations are carried out in the sun. They cannot be less than 1,000 miles in length, and from 200 to 300 miles in breadth. The most probable conjecture which has been offered respecting those leaf or lens-like objects is that the photosphere is an immense ocean of gaseous matter. What kind of matter? In a state of intense apparent incandescence, and that they are perspective projections of the sheets of flame, unquote. Note on that the photosphere is an immense ocean of gaseous matter, and the central mass too, as will be found, or rather the center of the reflection. End of note. Solar, quote, flames, unquote, seen through telescopes are reflections, says occultism. But see what occultists have to say to this in Book 1. Whatever they may be, those sheets of flame, it is evident they are the immediate sources of solar heat and light. Here we have a surrounding envelope of photogenic matter which pendulates with mighty energies, and by communicating its motion to the ethereal medium in stellar space, produces heat and light in far distant worlds. We have said that those forms have been compared to certain organisms, and Herschel says, though it would be too daring to speak of such organizations as partaking of life, within brackets, why not? Yet we do not know that vital action is competent to develop heat, light, and electricity. Can it be that there is truth in this fine thought? May the pulsing of vital matter in the central sun of our system be the source of all that life which crowds the earth and without doubt overspreads the other planets to which the sun is the mighty minister, unquote. Note on the speculation of Herschel. See 5 Years of Theosophy on page 258, an answer to the speculation of Herschel's. End of note. Occultism answers these queries in the affirmative, and science will find this to be the case one day. Again on page 156, Mr. Hunt writes, quote, but regarding life, vital force, as a power far more exalted than either light, heat, or electricity, and indeed capable of exerting a controlling power over them all, within brackets, this is absolutely occult, we are certainly disposed to view with satisfaction that speculation which supposes the photosphere to be the primary seat of vital power, and to regard with a poetic pleasure that hypothesis which refers the solar energies to life. Unquote. Thus we have an important scientific corroboration for one of our fundamental dogmas, namely that A. the sun is the storehouse of vital force, which is the noumenon of electricity, and B. that it is from its mysterious, never-to-be-fathomed depths that issue those life currents which thrill through space, as through the organisms of every living thing on earth. For see what another eminent physician says, who calls this our life fluid, nervous ether. Change a few sentences in the article extracts from which now follow, and you have another quasi-occult treatise on life force. This once it is again Dr. B. W. Richardson, FRS, who gives his views in the Popular Science Review, Volume 10, page 380 to 383, on nervous ether as he has on sun force and earth force. Quote, the idea attempted to be conveyed by the theory is that between the molecules of the matter, solid or fluid, of which the nervous organisms and indeed of which all the organic parts of the body are composed, there exists a refined subtle medium, vaporous or gaseous, which holds the molecules in a condition for motion upon each other and for arrangement and rearrangement of form, a medium by and through which all motion is conveyed. by and through which the one organ or part of the body is held in communion with the other parts, by which and through which the outer living world communicates with the living man, a medium which, being present, enables the phenomena of life to be demonstrated, and which, being universally absent, leaves the body actually dead," unquote. And the whole solar system falls into pralaya, the author might have added. But let us read further. Quote, "I used the word ether in its general sense as meaning a very light, vaporous or gaseous matter. I use it in short as the astronomer uses it when he speaks of the ether of space, by which he means a subtle but material medium. When I speak of a nervous ether, I do not convey that the ether is existent in nervous structure only. I believe truly that it is a special part of the nervous organization, but as nerves pass into all structures that have capacities for movement and sensibilities, so the nervous ether passes into all such parts. And as the nervous ether is, according to my view, a direct product from blood, so we may look upon it as a part of the atmosphere of the blood. The evidence in favor of the existence of an elastic medium pervading the nervous matter and capable of being influenced by simple pressure is all convincing. In nervous structure there is unquestionably a true nervous fluid, as our predecessors taught. Note, Paracelsus for one, and Archaeus. End of note. The precise chemical within brackets question mark composition of this fluid is not yet well known. The physical characters of it have been little studied. Note, rather than chemical, alchemical composition. End of note. Whether it moves in currents we do not know. Whether it circulates we do not know. Whether it is formed in the centers and passes from them to the nerves, or whether it's formed everywhere where blood enters nerve, we do not know. The exact uses of the fluid we do not consequently know. It occurs to my mind, however, that the veritable fluid of nervous matter is not of itself sufficient to act as a subtle medium that connects the outer with the inner universe of man and animal. I think, and this is the modification I suggest to the older theory, there must be another form of matter present during life, a matter which exists in the condition of vapor or gas, which pervades the whole nervous organism, surrounds us as an enveloping atmosphere, each molecule of nervous structure, and is the medium of all motion communicated to and from the nervous centers. Note, this vital force radiates around man like a luminous sphere, says Paracelsus in Paragranum. End of note. When it is once fairly presented to the mind that during life there is in the animal body a finely diffused form of matter, a vapor filling every part, and even stored in some parts, a matter constantly renewed by the vital chemistry, a matter as easily disposed of as the breath after it has served its purpose, a new flood of light breaks on the intelligence. Unquote. A new flood of light is certainly thrown on the wisdom of ancient and medieval occultism and its votaries, for Paracelsus wrote the same thing more than 300 years ago, namely in the 16th century, as follows, quote, "The whole of the microcosm is potentially contained in the liqueur vitae, a nerve fluid, in which is contained the nature, quality, character, and essence of beings." From De Generatione Hominis. The archeus of liqueur vitae is an essence that is equally distributed in all parts of the human body. The spiritus vitae takes its origin from the spiritus mundi. Being an emanation of the latter, it contains the elements of all cosmic influences, and is therefore the cause by which the action of the stars, cosmic forces, upon the invisible body of man, his vital linga sharira, may be explained. Unquote. From De Viribus Membrorum, see Life of Paracelsus by Franz Hartmann, M.D., FTS. Had Dr. Richardson studied all the secret works of Paracelsus, he would not have been obliged to confess so often, "We do not know," "It is not known to us," etc., etc. nor would he have ever pronounced that following sentence recanting the best portions of his independent rediscovery, in which he says on page 384, quote, "It may be urged that in this line of thought is included no more than the theory of the existence of the ether supposed to pervade space. It may be said that this universal ether pervades all the organism of the animal body as from without, and as part of every organization. This view would be pantheism physically discovered if it were true, within brackets double exclamation mark. It fails to be true because it would destroy the individuality of every individual sense." Unquote. We fail to see it, and we know it is not so. Pantheism may be physically rediscovered. It was known, seen, and felt by the whole of antiquity. Pantheism manifests itself in the vast expanse of the starry heavens, in the breathing of the seas and oceans, and the quiver of life of the smallest blade of grass. Philosophy rejects one finite and imperfect God in the universe, as the anthropomorphic deity of the monotheist is represented by his followers. It repudiates in its name of philotheosophia the grotesque idea that infinite absolute deity should, or rather could, have any, whether direct or indirect, relation to finite elusive evolutions of matter, and therefore cannot imagine a universe outside that deity, or the latter absent from the smallest speck of animate or inanimate substance. Note: this does not mean that every bush, tree, or stone is God, or a God, but only that every speck of the manifested material of cosmos belongs to and is the substance of God, however it may have fallen in its cyclic gyration through the eternities of the ever-becoming, and also that every such speck individually and cosmos collectively is an aspect and a reminder of that universal one soul, which philosophy refuses to call God, thus limiting the eternal and ever-present root and essence. End of note. Why either the ether or space or nervous ether should destroy the individuality of every sense seems incomprehensible for one acquainted with the real nature of that nervous ether under its Sanskrit, or rather esoteric and Kabbalistic name. Dr. Richardson agrees that, quote, "if we did not individually produce the medium of communication between ourselves and the outer world, if it were produced from without and adapted to one kind of vibration alone, there were fewer senses required than we possess. For, taking two illustrations only, ether of light is not adapted for sound, and yet we hear as well as see, while air, the medium of motion of sound, is not the medium of light, and yet we see and hear." Unquote. Now this is not so. The opinion that pantheism fails to be true because it would destroy the individuality of every individual sense shows that all the conclusions of the learned doctor are based on the modern physical theories, though he would fain reform them. But he will find it impossible to do this unless he allows the existence of spiritual senses to replace the gradual atrophy of the physical. We see and hear in accordance, of course in Dr. Richardson's mind, with the explanations of the phenomena of sight and hearing by that same materialistic science which postulates that we cannot see and hear otherwise. The occultists and the mystics know better. The Vedic Aryans were as familiar with the mysteries of sound and color as our physiologists on the physical plane, but they had mastered the secrets of both on planes inaccessible to the materialist. They knew of a double set of senses, spiritual and material. In a man who is deprived of one or more senses, the remaining become the more developed. For example, the blind man will recover his sight through the senses of touch, of hearing, etc., and he who is deaf will be able to hear through sight by seeing audibly the words uttered by the lips and mouth of the speaker. But these are cases that belong to the world of matter still. The spiritual senses, those that act on a higher plane of consciousness, are rejected a priori by physiology because the latter is ignorant of the sacred science. It limits the action of ether to vibrations, and dividing it from air, though air is simply differentiated and compound ether, makes it assume functions to fit in with the special theories of the physiologist. But there is a more real science in the teachings of the Upanishads, when these are correctly understood, than the Orientalists, who do not understand them at all, are ready to admit. Mental as well as physical correlations of the seven senses, 7 on the physical and 7 on the mental planes, are clearly explained and defined in the Vedas, and especially in the Upanishad called Gita, the Indestructible and the Destructible. Such is the double manifestation of the self. Of these, the indestructible is the existent, the true essence or nature of self, the underlying principles. The manifestation as an individual or entity is called the destructible. Thus speaks the ascetic in Gita. And also, everyone who is twice born, initiated, knows such is the teaching of the ancients. Space is the first entity. Now space, akasha, or the noumenon of ether, has one quality, and that is sound only. And the qualities of sound are shadga, rishabha, gandhara, madhyama, pankama, and beyond these 5, nishada and daivata, the Hindu gamut. These 7 notes of the scale are the principles of sound. See chapter 36 of Gita. The qualities of every element, as of every sense, are septenary, and to judge and dogmatize on them from their manifestation, likewise sevenfold in itself, on the material or objective plane above is quite arbitrary. For it is only by the self emancipating itself from these 7 causes of illusion that one acquires the knowledge, secret wisdom, of the qualities of objects of sense on their dual plane of manifestation, the visible and the invisible. Thus it is said, state this wonderful mystery. Here the assignment of causes exhaustively, the nose and the tongue and the eye and the skin, and the ear as the 5th organ of sense, mind and understanding. These 7 senses should be understood to be the causes of, that is, the knowledge of their qualities. Note, the division of the physical senses into 5 comes to us from great antiquity. But while adopting the number, no modern philosopher has asked himself how these senses could exist, that is, be perceived and used in a self-conscious way, unless there was the 6th sense, mental perception, to register and record them, and, this for the metaphysicians and occultists, the 7th, to preserve the spiritual fruition and remembrance thereof, as in a book of life which belongs to karma. The ancients divided the senses into 5, simply because their teachers, the initiates, stopped at the hearing, as being that sense which developed in the physical plane, got dwarfed rather, limited to this plane only at the beginning of the 5th race. The 4th race already had begun to lose the spiritual condition so preeminently developed in the 3rd race. End of note. Smell and taste and color, sound and touch as the 5th, the object of the mental operation and the object of the understanding, the higher spiritual sense of perception. These 7 are causes of action. He who smells, he who eats, he who sees, he who speaks, and he who hears as the 5th, he who thinks, and he who understands. These 7 should be regarded as the causes of the agents. The modern commentators, failing to comprehend the subtle meaning of the ancient scholiasts, take this sentence, causes of the agents, to mean that the powers of smelling, etc., when attributed to the self, make him appear as an agent, as an active principle, within brackets, ! Which is entirely fanciful. These 7 are understood to be the causes of the agents, because the objects are causes, as their enjoyment causes an impression. It means esoterically that they, these 7 senses, are caused by the agents, which are the deities. For what does or can the sentence which follows this one mean? Thus it is said, These 7 senses are the causes of emancipation, that is, when these causes are made ineffectual. And among the learned, the wise initiates, who understand the qualities which are in the position, in the nature rather, of the deities, each in its place, means simply that the learned understand the nature of the noumenoi of the various phenomena, and that qualities in this instance mean the qualities of the high planetary or elementary gods or intelligences, which rule the elements and their products, and not at all their senses, as the modern commentator thinks. For the learned suppose their senses to have aught to do with them any more than with their self. Read pages 278 and 279 of the 8th volume of the Sacred Books of the East, Anugita. End of note. These, the agents, being possessed of qualities, sattva, rajas, tamas, enjoy their own qualities, agreeable and disagreeable, from Anugita. Then one reads in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, the deity, or Krishna, saying, "Only some know me truly. Earth, water, fire, air, space, or akasha, aether, mind, understanding, and egoism, or the perception of all the former on the elusive plane. This is a lower form of my nature. Know that there is another form of my nature, and higher than this, which is animate, O you mighty arms, and by which this universe is upheld. All this is woven upon me like numbers of pearls upon a thread." Mundakopanishad, page 298. I am the taste in the water, O son of Kunti. I am the light of the sun and moon. I am sound. That is, the occult essence which underlies all these and the other qualities of the various things mentioned in space, the fragrant smell in the earth, refulgence in the fire, etc., etc. Truly then, one should study occult philosophy before one begins to verify and seek the mysteries of nature on its surface alone, as he alone who knows the truth about the qualities of nature, who understands the creation of all entities, is emancipated from error, says the preceptor, accurately understanding the great tree of which the unperceived, occult nature, the root of all, is the sprout from the seed, Parabrahmam, which consists of the understanding, Mahat, or the universal intelligent soul as its trunk, the branches of which are the great egoism, in the holes of which are the sprouts, namely the senses, of which the great, occult, or invisible, elements of the flower bunches, the gross elements, the gross objective matter, the smaller boughs, which are always possessed of leaves, always possessed of flowers, which is eternal, and the seed of which is the Brahman, the deity, and cutting it with that excellent sword, knowledge, secret wisdom, one attains immortality and casts off birth and death. Notes. Note in the great egoism, ahamkara, I suppose, that ego-ship or aham-ship which leads to every error. And, note, the elements are the 5 tanmatras of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, the producers of the grosser elements. End of note. This is the tree of life, the Ashvarta tree, only after the cutting of which the slave of life and death, man, can be emancipated. But the men of science know naught, nor will they hear of the sword of knowledge used by the adepts and ascetics. Hence the one-sided remarks of the most liberal among them, based on and flowering from undue importance given to the arbitrary divisions and classification of physical science. Occultism heeds them very little, and nature still less. The whole range of physical phenomena proceed from the primary of ether, akasha, as dual-natured akasha proceeds from undifferentiated chaos, so-called, the latter being the primary aspect of mula prakriti, the root matter and the first abstract idea one can form of Parabrahman. Modern science may divide its hypothetically conceived ether in as many ways as it likes. The real aether of space will remain as it is throughout. It has its 7 principles, as all the rest of nature has, And where there was no ether, there would be no sound, as it is the vibrating soundboard in nature, in all of its 7 differentiations. This is the first mystery the initiates of old have learned. Our present normal physical senses were, from our present point of view, abnormal in those days of slow and progressive downward evolution and fall into matter. And there was a day when all that which in our modern times is regarded as phenomena, so puzzling to the psychologists now compelled to believe in them, such as thought transference, clairvoyance, clairaudience, etc., in short, all that which is called now, quote, wonderful and abnormal, unquote. All that and much more belonged to the senses and faculties common to all humanity. We are, however, cycling back and cycling forward, that is, having lost in spirituality that which we acquired in physical development until almost the end of the 4th rays. We, mankind, are as gradually and imperceptibly losing now in the physical all that we regain once more in the spiritual re-evolution. This process must go on until the period which will bring the 6th root rays on a parallel line with the spirituality of the 2nd, long extinct mankind. But this will hardly be understood at present. We must return to Dr. Richardson's hopeful though somewhat incorrect hypothesis about nervous ether. Under the misleading translation of the word as space, akasha, it has just been shown in the ancient Hindu system as the firstborn of the One, having but one quality, sound, which is septenary. In esoteric language, this One is the Father deity, and sound is synonymous with logos, verben, or the Son, S-O-N, that is. Whether consciously or otherwise, it must be the latter, and Dr. Richardson, while preaching an occult doctrine, chooses the lowest form of the septenary nature of that sound, and speculates upon it, adding, "The theory I offer is that the nervous ether is an animal product. In different classes of animals it may differ in physical quality so as to be adapted to the special wants of the animal, but essentially it plays one part in all animals, and is produced in all in the same way," unquote. Herein lies the nucleus of error leading to all the resultant mistaken views. This nervous ether is the lowest principle of the primordial essence which is life. It is animal vitality, diffused in all nature and acting according to the conditions it finds for its activity. It is not an animal product, but the living animal, the living flower or plant are its products. The animal tissues only absorb it, according to their more or less morbid or healthy state, as do physical materials and structures, in their primogenal state, nota bene, and henceforward, from the moment of the birth of the entity, are regulated, strengthened, and fed by it. It descends in a larger supply to vegetation in the Sushumna sunray, which lights and feeds the moon, and it is through her beams that it pours its light upon and penetrates man and animal, more during their sleep and rest than when they are in full activity. Therefore, Dr. Richardson errs again in stating that, quote, "the nervous ether is not, according to my idea of it, in itself active, nor an excitant of animal motion in the sense of a force, but it is essential as supplying the conditions by which the motion is rendered possible," unquote. It is just the reverse. And, quote, "it is the conductor of all vibrations of heat, of light, of sound, of electrical action, of mechanical friction." Note, the conductor in the sense of a padi, a material or physical basis, but as the second principle of the universal soul and vital force in nature, it is intelligently guided by the 5th principle thereof. End of note. It holds the nervous system throughout in perfect tension during states of life. True. By exercise it is disposed of, or rather generated. And when demand for it is greater than the supply, its deficiency is indicated by nervous collapse or exhaustion. Note, and too great an exuberance of it in the nervous system leads as often to disease and death. If it were the animal system which generated it, such would not be the case, surely. Hence, the latter emergency shows its independence of the system and connection with the sun force, as Metcalfe and Professor Hunt explain it. End of note. It accumulates in the nervous centers during sleep, bringing them, if I may so speak, to their due tone, and therewith raising the muscles to awakening and renewed life, unquote. Just so, this is quite correct, and as comprehensible. Therefore, the body, fully renewed by it, presents capacity for motion, fullness of form, life. The body bereft of it presents inertia, the configuration of shrunken death, the evidence of having lost something physical that was in it when it lived. Modern science denies the existence of a vital principle. This extract is a clear proof of its grand mistake. But this physical something, as we call life fluid, the liqueur vitae of Paracelsus, has not deserted the body, as Dr. Richardson thinks. It has only changed its state from activity to passivity, and become latent owing to the too morbid state of the tissues, on which it has no more hold. Once the rigor mortis absolute, the liqueur vitae will reawaken into action and begin its work on the atoms chemically. Brahma Vishnu, the creator and the preserver of life, will have transformed himself into Shiva, the destroyer. Lastly, he writes on page 387, the nervous ether may be poisoned. It may, have diffused through it. By simple gaseous diffusion, other gases or vapors derived from without. It may derive from within products of substances swallowed and ingested, or gases of decomposition produced during disease in the body itself, unquote. And the learned gentleman might have added on the same occult principle that the nervous ether of one person can be poisoned by that nervous ether of another person, or his auric emanations. But see what Paracelsus said of nervous ether. Quote, the archeus is of a magnetic nature, and attracts or repels other sympathetic or antipathetic forces belonging to the same plane. The less power of resistance for astral influences a person possesses, the more he will be subject to such influences. The vital force is not enclosed in man, but radiates within and around him like a luminous sphere, aura, and it may be made to act at a distance. It may poison the essence of life, blood, and cause diseases, or it may purify it after it has been made impure and restore the health. From Paragranum, Life of Paracelsus by Dr. F. Hartman. That the two, archeus and nervous ether, are identical is shown by the English scientist who says that the tension of it generally may be too high or too low, that it may be so owing to local changes in the nervous matter it invests. Under sharp excitation it may vibrate as if in a storm and plunge every muscle under cerebral spinal control into uncontrolled motion, unconscious convulsions. This is called nervous excitation, but no one except occultists knows the reason of such nervous perturbation or explains the primary causes of it. The principle of life may kill when too exuberant, as also when there is too little of it. But this principle on the manifested or our plane is but the effect and the result of the intelligent action of the hosts collectively, principle, the manifesting life and light. It is itself subordinate to and emanates from the ever-invisible, eternal and absolute one life in a descending and reascending scale of hierarchic degrees, a true septenary ladder with the sound or the logos at the upper end and the vidyadharas, the inferior pieties, at the lower. Note on vidyadharas. In a recent work on the symbolism in Buddhism and Christianity, in Buddhism and Roman Catholicism rather, many later rituals and dogmas in Northern Buddhism, in its popular exoteric form, being identical with those of the Latin Church, some curious facts are to be found. The author of this volume, with more pretensions than erudition, has indiscriminately crammed into his work ancient and modern Buddhist teachings, and sorely confused Lamaism with Buddhism. On page 404 of this volume called Buddhism in Christendom, or Jesus the Essene, our pseudo-Orientalist devotes himself to criticizing the 7 principles of the esoteric Buddhists and attempts to ridicule them. On page 405, the closing page, he speaks enthusiastically of the Vidyadharas. the 7 great legions of dead men made wise. Now these Vidyajaras, whom some Orientalists call demigods, are in fact exoterically a kind of siddhas, affluent in devotion, and esoterically they are identical with the 7 classes of Pitris, one class of which endow man in the 3rd race with self-consciousness by incarnating in the human shells. The hymn to the sun, at the end of his queer volume of Mosaic, which endows Buddhism with a personal god, within brackets double exclamation mark, is an unfortunate thrust at the very proofs so elaborately collected by the unlucky author. Theosophists are fully aware that Mr. Rhys Davids has expressed his opinion on their beliefs likewise. He said that the theories propounded by the author of Esoteric Buddhism were not Buddhism. The remark is the result of an unfortunate mistake of writing Buddhism instead of Buddhism, or Buddhism, that is, of connecting the system with Gautama's religion instead of with the secret wisdom taught by Krishna, Sankaracharya, and by many others, as much as by Buddha. And B, of the impossibility of Mr. Rhys Davids knowing anything of true esoteric teachings. But he is, at all events, the greatest Pali and Buddhist scholar of the day, and whatever he may say is entitled to respectful hearing. But when one who knows no more of exoteric Buddhism on scientific and materialistic lines than he knows of esoteric philosophy, deflames those whom he honors with his spite and assumes with the theosophists the airs of a profound scholar, one can only smile and heartily laugh at him. End of note. Of course, the occultists are fully aware of the fact that the vitalist fallacy, so derided by Vogt and Huxley, is nevertheless still countenanced in very high scientific quarters, and therefore they are happy to feel that they do not stand alone. Thus Professor de Quatrefages writes, quote, "It is very true we do not know what life is, but no more do we know what the force is that set the stars in motion. Living beings are heavy, and therefore subject to gravitation. They are the seat of numerous and various physiochemical phenomena which are indispensable to their existence, and which must be referred to the action of aerodynamy, electricity, heat, etc. But these phenomena are here manifested under the influence of another force. Life is not antagonistic to the inanimate forces, but it governs and rules their action by its laws." Unquote. A note. See the Human Species, page 11. Next chapter is chapter 9, The Solar Theory.